Hi YouTube. So this is my new channel. This is completely for cosplay tips and help only. Um, the first project I'm going to be telling you about is a furry tail. Now, if you're a big furry fan, this is going to be really easy for you and help. There's other ways to do the tail by yarn completely and hand sewn. Yet, I've heard many people it takes about 40 hours or more to do the tail. It depends on how hard you work on the tail. That's another project I'll tell you later. This one, we're doing the regular fur. The fake fur. Fox fur. Your basic tips for today is your fursuit tail instructions. Number one, draw your sketch. Many people forget this step because it seems like, oh, well, I have it. Well, it's really helpful to go back and look at the sketch. That way, when you put it on, when it's all done, you can go back and look at your sketch and go, oh, I did it correct, or I missed a step. Or if you have it in your mind and you forget what some of it looks like, it's a good thing to draw a sketch. Number two, draw a pattern. Make sure the fur on the pattern is going the direction you want the fur to go. For instance, you draw a tail that's curved. And there's pictures of my cosplay tips on Google+. I have all the instructions there as well. Make sure the arrow is going down the way you want it. There you go. Then in the end, when you get down further in the steps, you'll be sure to have your way. Number three, cut out the pattern pieces. The pattern pieces will help you a lot. Determine what color you want along with the tip of the tail. So you cut the pattern out and along with the tip of the tail, any different color within the pattern you made. So for instance, you have three colors you want to do. The tip is black and there's another color. So for instance, it's white, purple, and the tip is black. Make sure you cut those sections out individually. That way you don't get fur mixed up. And also, going back on the pattern, make sure whatever color that section is, make sure you write an initial like green, GR, purple, PURPLE, or just P. Make sure you do that, because if you don't, you might have a little trouble later on. Number four, cut your fur. Make sure the fur is going the same direction your pattern was going that you made earlier. Again, this is where that sketch helps you. The sketch and the pattern will help you tremendously on the fur. Oh, and by the way, another tip. Make sure you do not cut the fur upwards. Turn it over where the flat side is. Also, X-Acto knife. Be sure not to cut a lot of the fur off when you're cutting it off on the backside. And anything underneath the surface, like your carpet or anything there, make sure you do not cut the carpet or anything, because when an X-Acto knife is new, it's sharp. Be sure to not cut anything underneath it. So make sure you use something flat or a wood base. Number five, sew the fur. Turn the fabric to where the fur is inside out. The fur, if you do it on the outside, you're going to have these little edges that are going to be a pain in the butt if you don't. So turn it where the exact same way you did the last step. When you cut your fur, make sure it's over with the flat side. The fur must be on the bottom. When you sew the fur, keep the fur on the bottom and sew it like that. So when you turn it inside out in the next step, your fur doesn't have any edges. Again, here it is. Sew the fur. Tip. Here's a good tip. Do not rush in this step. This step is very crucial when it comes to sewing, because if you do a really bad job, it's going to turn on the outside and you're going to see holes. If you miss a step, if you miss a sewing, if you miss a seam, it's going to be hard to fix once it's all done. Another tip is use a hand. If you're really good at hand sewing and you can hand sew quite well, and you're more comfortable with it, hand sew. But if you are bad at hand sewing, I prefer you guys to use a sewing machine. Be sure to have anybody who's under the age of like 18 or so, or can actually do the sewing really well. So I should say under 13, and they try to do a furry tail. When you're using the sewing machine, make sure you have an adult beside you just in case. We don't want no fingers sewed. Number 6, turn your fabric inside out. After you turn the fabric, or after you sew the fabric, I'm sorry. It's really crucial that you turn it back outside, because then you're going to look at the full project. Next, you're almost done. You're almost there. Stuff your tail. Stuffing your tail tip. A thrift store like Goodwill, the Salvation Army. Go use the stuffed animals that you can buy, and they're very quick and easy. Plus, all you gotta do is cut the polyester stuffing out of them, and you can use them for your tail. Plus, you can use that over and over again, and it's cheaper. When you're done stuffing the tail, make sure you feel how you want it. Make sure you leave a top base about an inch from the top to sew. Next step, sew the hole of the tail that you just made an indent in. Shave around once you've sewed it. Shave around the top of the hole where you sewed it, because in the next step it's going to be a lot easier to do. Next step, elastic belt loop. You're going to need some elastic, preferably the color of your tail or your fur. Something to blend in with whatever you're wearing. Then, what you're going to need, this is where it comes in, the shaving part. So, after you cut the elastic, here's what you'll need. I say, this is my estimate, a 6-inch piece. It could be shorter, you may trim. It depends on how big the tail is. If it is a small tail that it just pops out, I suggest you use almost less than 6 inches. So, half of 6 inches. So, roughly around 2 to 3 inches. But if you have a big tail, this is for a big tail, but yet again, you guys can estimate in measurement how big the tail is you want. If it's a pretty big, like a medium-sized tail, I prefer you use a 6-inch piece of elastic and then cut it in half. After you've done that, sew the elastic onto the closed hole you had and try it out. There you go, guys. My whole tip for this. I hope this helped. See ya!